Defense offset agreements are arrangements in which the seller of a product or service agrees to buy products or services from its client as an inducement. These agreements illegal trade practices in the aerospace and military industries, but seen by some as protectionist and distorting of competition. Offset agreements often involve trade in military goods and services and are alternatively called industrial compensations, industrial cooperation, offsets, industrial and regional benefits, balances, just retour or equilibrium. To define mechanisms more complex than counter-trade, counter-trade can also be considered one of the many forms of defense offset to compensate a purchasing country. The main difference between a generic offset and counter-trade, both common practices in the international defense trade, is the involvement of money. In counter-trade, goods are paid through barters or other mechanisms without the exchange of money, while in other defense offsets money is the measure and the medium of exchange. Definition: an offset agreement is an agreement between two parties whereby a supplier agrees to buy products from the party to whom it is selling, in order to win the buyer as a customer and offset the buyer's outlay. Generally, the seller is a foreign company and the buyer is a government that stipulates that the seller must then agree to buy products from companies within the country. Often, the aim of this process is to even up a country's balance of trade. This is frequently an integral part of international defense contracts. Offset as unfair burden. The U.S. government's definition of offset agreement is the most crucial, since the U.S. aerospace and defense industry is the biggest exporter of aerospace and defense products, and therefore engaged in the majority of the world's offsets. The U.S. has a Commerce Department division, the Bureau of Industry and Security, that deals specifically with U.S. defense offset agreements with foreign nations as a main subset of U.S. industrial security. BIS, whose main task is protecting U.S. security from the point of view of export of high technology, fostering commercially acceptable U.S. foreign policy, and protecting U.S. economic interests, deals with U.S. aerospace and defense companies that export defense products, systems or services, involving offset agreements, that is, those sales collateral or additional agreements requested by purchasers. BIS defines offsets as mandatory compensations required by foreign governments when purchasing weapon systems and services. The U.S. government underlines a compulsory aspect of this trade practice, since the United States, with other weapons exporting countries, such as Germany and France, opposes offsets as forms of protectionism and harmful transgressions of free market rules. These governments frown on offset agreements, consider them to be both market distorting and inefficient. Offset as partnership. In 2008, the Brazilian Minister of Strategic Affairs, speaking of a major defense purchase by his country, highlighted this key point. "We will not simply be buyers or clients, but partners." Quote, "The competition by different companies in offering comparable weapons to a country is also on the level of sharing or partnership with the purchaser." Roberto Mong of Beira Unger added, "Offset as marketing tool. In weapons trade, defense contractors are fully aware that offsets are powerful marketing tools to motivate the purchase, by showing and giving additional advantages for the purchasing country besides investing in military equipment." The U.S. defense industry position seems to be more practical, and somewhat quietly non-aligned with U.S. government economic or political assessment of defense offsets. Generally speaking, one can understand offsets as a widespread sales technique. As such, they are not restricted to weapons sale, they belong to commerce itself, in the same way that rebates, price pack deals, or loyalty rewards programs do. Understanding defense offsets to be part of a sales technique helps to curb the justified yet excessive emphasis on the mandatory nature. Often, defense offsets are more motivating than the primary defense acquisition for personal or political reasons. This may seem irrational, but it is part of commerce. If one adds the prevalent political aspect of spending huge public funds on modern weapons, then the motivating significance of defense offsets could not be underestimated in contemporary decision processes of democracies. Prime defense contractors are well aware of offsets' power in the psychologies of democracies. As anyone can understand, the seller will include the cost of the envelope B, that is, of the offset, and its added value for the purchaser, in its total cost. In other words, the client will pay for the offset. It is not a free lunch. But the key question is, to what extent is the offset proposal a factor in the consideration of defense contractors tendered during the evaluation and the decision procedures? Transparency International clearly summarizes that using offsets as marketing tools makes offsets the ideal playground for corruption. There are three main categories of corruption risk from offsets. 1. Improperly influencing the need for a particular defense acquisition in the first place. 2. Influencing the competitive decision for the main contract in non-transparent ways. 3. Allowing favors to be repaid to corrupt government officials via the offset contracts. The universe of this military niche of offsets trade is sophisticated and less innocuous than commonly believed. In 2000, Daniel Pearl wrote an article about the universe of offsets. Could the sale of U.S. weapons in the Persian Gulf help an oil concern unload gasoline stations in Europe? Yes, under the new logic of international arms deals. Quote, Pearl describes the newfound world of indirect offsets. For decades, countries that buy weapons have imposed offset requirements on the suppliers that keep some of the economic benefits of the deal at home. Now, defense contractors are moving toward more exotic plans to satisfy the growing offset obligations. Many deals have no relationship to the weapons being sold, and a few have only a tenuous connection to the country that is buying. The market size of the international offset business is related to the volume of international weapons trade in the world. According to SIPRI, in 2007 there were $51 billion of weapons exports, an approximate value because it is open source, and not all weapons deals data are open source information. Defense offset example. As an example of a defense offset proposal, we could describe a hypothetical case of Nation P buying 300 tanks from Defense Company S. The total sale contract is $400 million and Nation P requests offset of 120%. Defense Company S is obliged to fulfill an offset equal to 120% of the sales contract, that is $480 million. Nation P agrees on a list of specific offset deals and programs to fulfill the agreed total obligation with Company S. The offset agreement includes both direct and indirect offsets. Nation P also assigns a credit value for each typology of offsets offered by Company S. The credit value for the offset obligations is not the actual value, but it is the actual value by a multiplier that expresses the degree of interest of Nation P in the proposed offsets. In other words, something deemed very valuable by Nation P will have a high multiplier that expresses the importance and the value to Nation P of that type of offset. The multiplier translates Nation P's attached value into the credit value that eventually accounts for the fulfillment of the agreed sum of $480 million. It is evident that with no multipliers, 120% offset would be nonsense. Most of the offset packages are divided into direct and indirect offsets. Here is a hypothetical, complex offset offer, divided into direct and indirect offsets in Nation P. Direct offsets co-production. Nation P chooses one or more local companies to manufacture some components of the tanks, such as turrets and some of the internal components. The actual value of the components is $70 million. Nation P assigns a multiplier of 3, since this develops capabilities of its military-industrial base and creates jobs in Nation P. The total credit value for the fulfillment of the overall offset obligation is $70 million x 3 equals $210 million. Indirect offsets. Foreign direct investments. Company S makes investments in 5 companies in Nation P. The total value of the investments is $14.5 million, and the multiplier is 4, a high multiplier. Since Nation P suffers from a chronic lack of foreign direct investments, this makes an additional credit value for Company S of $58 million. Technology transfer. Company S provides water desalination technologies to one Nation P company. This technology is particularly appreciated by Nation P. Its actual value is $20 million, but the credit value is 7 times the actual value, that is, $140 million. Export assistance and marketing. Company S provides commercial assistance to market products and services of a Nation P company in a difficult market, such as, for instance, the Middle East. The assistance is offered for 8 years, at the value of $3 million per year. Nation P considers this assistance to export as important to create new revenue streams and jobs for its company, and sets a multiplier of 3. Credit value, $72 million. Nation P controls not only the supply of the military systems or services, but also the implementation of the offsets according to the offset agreement included or related to the main supply contract. This control is within the Minister of Defense and/or Ministry of Economy or Finance, or Ministry of Industry and Trade. Often arms importing nations establish special agencies for the supervision of the defense offsets. Types of offset. Offset proposals often make a distinction between direct and indirect offset. Direct offset is a side agreement that has to do with the main product, service that is bought, sold, that is military equipment, systems, or services. They may be also called military offsets. For example, a buyer of military equipment may be given the right to produce a component of a related technology in the buyer's country. Indirect offsets are side agreements that are not directly related to the product, service that is bought, sold. Most people refer to such category of offsets as civilian offsets, though there are many indirect offsets that are not civilian offsets. Indirect offsets may take the form of services, investments, counter-trade and/or co-production. For instance, Greek companies produce part of the Lockheed C-130 that they bought from U.S. The Greek co-production is a U.S. direct offset, or, in a more sophisticated form of offset involving 3 countries. Portugal is in charge of the maintenance of Pguietti Lockheed Martin aircraft. This is a Portuguese direct offset, since Portugal bought the aircraft, and is partner in charge of the maintenance. An investment in a security software company of Romania, or in assisting the export and marketing in difficult areas of a Belgian environmental company, are other forms of actual indirect offsets. The most common types of direct-indirect offsets are. The most complete and accurate list of actual offsets can be found in the BIS annual reports to Congress, where all forms of registered offset are codified, according to the old standard industrial classification. Some offset mechanisms. Since offsets typically include military departments of sovereign nations comparable to the U.S. Defense Department, many countries have offset laws, public regulations, or, alternatively, formal internal offset policies. Defense prime contractor offset service providers. In medium and large tenders for weapons systems, the bid can be very complex, involving one or more than one company as bidder. The main offer is guided by a prime contractor that may have other companies associated to the bid as partners or as subcontractors. However, in regards to the agreed offset proposal, only the prime contractor is liable toward the final client for its fulfillment. Since offsets are increasingly complex, the prime contractor may hire subcontractors to fulfill its contractual obligations. While the liability for the offset stays with the prime contractor, the job can be executed by a subcontractor or an offset fulfiller. One of the collateral benefits of offsets in U.S. is the proliferation of legal and economic jobs in the offsets sector, that goes from international legal companies to the fully staffed international offices of U.S. defense companies. In addition, the establishment of new companies in offset venture capital, in offset marketing assistance, offset fulfillers that provide the support services to the defense and aerospace industry. While many offset programs originally evolved as a result of defense and aerospace sales, today many new offset industrial partnership programs have developed as a result of nations wanting to improve their industrial base, level of technology, and desire to become more self-sufficient across a broad range of industry sectors. As a result of this new interest and demand for industrial partnership, there has been both a growth and establishment of new offset associations. There are both global and domestic offset industrial partnership organizations. The largest and most widely attended global association is juste, the Global Offset and Counter-trade Association, whose purpose is to promote trade and commerce between companies around the world and the foreign customers through a greater understanding of counter-trade and offset. Each year juste hosts several industry meetings in partnership with other European and American offset organizations such as the ADS, Aerospace Defense Security, and DIOA, the U.S. Defense Industry Offset Association. DIOA was established in 1985 by members of the U.S. defense industry to foster education, networking, and guidelines for professionalism in offsets implementations. The industry meetings referenced above are attended by leading global industrial companies, companies that specialize in providing support services for industrial partnership fulfillment, and by various government and military authorities, mostly from national ministries of defense and economy, who oversee and monitor offset and industrial partnership programs. The purpose of these industry meetings is to educate and to foster relationships between the various offset obligors and beneficiaries so that real and sustainable economic benefits can be delivered to nations who are seeking to improve the respective economies. Offsets and industrial partnership programs have been evolving for over 3 decades, and there are dozens of articles that describe various successes and challenges that have resulted from implementing offset programs. The most widely read publication that deals with the developments in the offset and industrial participation arena is Counter-trade and Offset. Offset fulfillers, service providers, may perform various support services, including marketing assistance, sourcing and structuring venture capital or other forms of corporate credit for foreign direct investment, or more complex things, such as a joint ventures to produce shrimp, a sugar factory, factory, or recently, environment and renewable energy. Offset certificates, penalties, confidentiality clauses, pre-offset activities. Offsets are of various durations. They may be planned to last for 1 or 2 years, but 8 to 10-year plans are very common. Exceptionally long is an offset like Al-Yamama program, a BAE UK offset in Saudi Arabia in place since 1987. Clients have in place mechanisms to control their implementations, and to certificate milestone accomplishments in their offset programs. An offset supervision authority certifies the advancement in the offset completion in percentages, issuing offset certificates. These certificates may be issued to prime contractors fulfilling their offset agreement, but also to offset fulfillers that have subcontracted the job from prime contractors and registered as such in the foreign countries. When there are multipliers, such certificates express the percentage of completion in credit value. Offset fulfillers redeems the offset certificates through contracts or subcontracts with the prime contractor. More recently, given the importance and the growth of offset practices around the world, offset fulfillers can sell the certificates to prime contractors other than their initial one, as long as they have national offset commissions authorizations. In this profitable niche of defense industry made by offset specialists, lawyers and companies, there is also a currency and a trade of offset certificates. Like in any contract, there are forms of penalty for failing to complete offset obligations. Many nations have rigid systems of penalties, including the use of bank guarantees, while other nations believe in continued negotiations that are based on the best effort clauses. The list of incentives and penalties for offset is no different from many other systems of procurement, with 2 remarkable exceptions. 1. In the offset business, there are 2 contracts proceeding in parallel, i.e., primary and side contract. A. The supply of defense equipment, services from the defense company to the client, according to contractual specification. B. The offset's progress is monitored by the same client, but most of the times by a different state entity, according to contractual offset agreement. These 2 contracts impact on each other and problems with one can affect the other. However, since most offsets today are not direct, this may create confusions and distortions, especially due to indirect offsets. 2. In direct offsets contracts there are legitimate clauses of confidentiality that in several countries may even assume value of official classification, up to secret of state. In European Union states, however, extending state secret classifications to indirect offsets that have nothing to do with military state security is considered an abuse. For instance, classifying an offset not related to state security or military preparedness, such as indirect and civilian offsets in pharmaceutical research, environmental technologies, or export of assistance of any non-military security product, leads not only to major market distortions but also to possibly unpunished corruption protected by baseless secrecy. Pre-offset activities are allowed and welcomed by several countries. They are like offsets without certainties to obtain credit value. These activities are straight marketing activities, similar to lobbying to promote specific defense purchases. These pre-offset activities must be registered as such with national authorities. Often pre-offset activities will receive certificates after a sale. Defense companies include them in the marketing budget, but after the sale, these offsets go into their offset budgets and count toward offset fulfillment. These kinds of pre-offset activities are sales arguments to convince the buying state of the strength and reliability of the aerospace and defense company as potential supplier and partner. The pre-offsets arena is also the delicate and problematic field of sale facilitators, and, precisely because the client is a state, this must be monitored with additional care, since this field is prone to abuse and outright corruption. Foreign military and direct commercial sales, known offsets, and FMF for the U.S., the major world exporter of weapons by far. There are two main ways to sell weapons to a foreign country. The first is referred to as direct commercial sale, and it is accompanied to government sale. The second way is referred to as foreign military sales, that is a government-to-government sale. A direct commercial sale is highly supervised by U.S. government and even by the U.S. Congress, in spite of its free market appearance. The arms trade, because of its connection with national security, is never free from strict government supervision. For a sale to a foreign country's Defense Department, a U.S. defense firm must be licensed. It is checked by the Defense Department and by the State Department, and, in the case of relevant sales, even authorized or vetoed by U.S. Congress. Direct commercial sales are highly regulated because of security, political, and commercial reasons. Even from the point of view of indirect and non-military offset agreements, U.S. defense companies and the subcontractors must present detailed report of their offset activities to the Commerce Department, Bureau of Industry and Security. Foreign military sales are indirect sales of weapons produced by one or more U.S. contractors through an agency of the Department of Defense, the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. In a way, DSCA acts as prime contractor's agent in promoting and selling U.S.-made weapons to foreign countries. The known FMS disadvantage is that DSCA adds to the final sale price a small percentage for its own administrative costs. The advantage is some free training with U.S. Armed Forces for joint international operations. In this type of sale, however, there are two important aspects in regards to the offset business. 1. Since 1990, under a specific directive by President George Bush, no U.S. federal agency or U.S. government employee can be involved in the offset business. To each press release about AFMS, there is a standard disclaimer. There are no known offset agreements proposed in connection with this sale. Quote, "This language seems to imply that U.S. government, as the broker for the FMS case, has special insight into the transaction and is almost certifying that there are, in fact, no offsets." Nothing could be further from the truth. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency acts on behalf of the prime contractor with a foreign government and refuses even the mere knowledge about offsets. But under the FMS program, prime contractors are allowed to put all their offset costs into the final price. The cost of the offset is not even itemized in the FMS offer, and if the client wants to discuss or simply to know the cost of the offset, the client must speak directly with the contractor and not with DSCA. In other words, U.S. government cannot deal with offsets. U.S. defense prime contractors can and do. DSCA has made available in its complete manual details and analytical explanations for U.S. defense companies on how to include the offset various costs into the contract and invoices. So prime contractors, even under FMS, are allowed to recover all costs of any offsets which are associated with those contracts. To be sure, U.S. government agencies may not enter into or commit U.S. companies to any offset agreement. Quote, "De facto, during the Cold War, offsets had different functions and often U.S. government agencies were directly involved. President Bush, by ending the Cold War with the victory, likewise ended U.S. agencies' liability in delicate practices like the offsets, since they lost the primary political value they had during the Cold War. 2. U.S. funds assigned by United States foreign military financing that may be connected with foreign military sales cannot be used for any type of offsets, if they are non-repayable funds. On the other hand, FMF funds may be used for offset costs if they are loans. In any case, U.S. government agencies may not enter into or commit U.S. firms to any offset agreement.